Welcome to the #1 podcast covering Michigan State basketball. The Final Four is not on the schedule. Join Rod and me, Eric, as we dive deep into the Spartans to get you prepared for every game. Subscribe today for in-depth recruiting updates and fantastic interviews with today's important college basketball personalities like Robbie Hummel.
Thanks for having me. I have listened to your guys' podcast numerous times on drives throughout any Midwestern Big Ten city. So I am big fans of your guys' work.
Jay Billis.
And next time, hey, if anybody in Michigan wants a December tea time, call me. You wimps won't show up, but I'll be there. I'll be there and play in the cold. And Izzo will be in front of the fire with hot chocolate.
Coaches Thomas Kelly.
No problem. Glad to be back, man. Glad to be back.
Mike Garland.
You just can't sit there and trade twos for threes. You can't do it. You're going to lose. Coming down the stretch, you're going to lose.
And more. You won't find better coverage of Spartan hoops than you will get here. For both the casual and hardcore fan, come along as we take you for a green and white ride. Hey everybody, it's Eric alongside Rod, here to talk about MSU's 73-55 win over Rutgers at the Breslin this afternoon. A special thanks to all of you who support the show financially over at tffinots.com/support, and especially those of you who continue to listen and share the show with your friends and family. Big thank you to those starting to leave 5-star reviews on your podcast players, especially Spotify, that created a new show through some sort of mess up on their end. We're still trying to work on getting that cleared up, but continue leaving those reviews. It really helps the algorithms and other Spartan fans find the show. Anyway, this was a game that Michigan State had to get. We talked about that before the game. The Spartans now moved to 2-4 in the league and tied for 11th on the back of a pretty good offensive effort, despite Rutgers shooting the ball much better than usual from behind the arc. The game was definitely in doubt partway through the second half until Michigan State went on a 19-0 run to ice the game. The unexpected highlight of the game came at the end, of course, as Steven Izzo took starter Austin Williams off the dribble for an and one on a shot that looks kind of like it belonged in the Hoosiers movie as it bounced around on the rim until it finally fell through. It was a interesting day, as we were talking before. We came on the air about the snowmageddon. It depends on where you're coming from. It was very cold in East Lansing. It wasn't quite as cold out here in Grand Rapids, but we got 9 inches of snow overnight, and so I had to clear out my driveway before we headed out the road. And then once we hit Portland, right where Nudge Printing is, it seems to be kind of the end of the snow belt. And then the sun came out and it was just cold. So anyway, hopefully everyone's staying warm and ready for the Lions game, which we're trying to get this recorded before that big game starts, which is actually funny. About at least 2 instances during the game, the Let's Go Lions chant broke out in the crowd.
Yeah, you could hear it on TV, and they mentioned it on the broadcast.
Yeah. They had to wait until the game was no longer in doubt. That was like later in the game.
Sure.
Sure. Yeah. So anyway, I thought overall it was fun to get back to Breslin. Obviously, Michigan State was happy to be back home as well, and the shooting was much better, improved, and the defense was very good too against a team that really struggled defensively. I thought or offensively, and even I think when Rutgers was hitting shots and. They were not the easy. There were a couple that were left open, but for the most part, Michigan State was not making it super easy. They were just hitting a lot of threes that I think, ordinarily they don't make. And the second half, they missed a couple of those, in which they looked like, what you had expected earlier. But it just shows you got to stay on your game because teams can bring it for a little while. And, these are Division I, Power 5 conference, level athletes. They can hurt you if you're not careful. And it was definitely in doubt. I don't know what that run started, but it seemed like about 13 minutes left in the game, maybe, or something like
somewhere that. 15, 14, 13, somewhere in there. Yeah. Look, great day in terms of the first thing is obviously Michigan State getting another win.
Yeah, right.
Which
you had to do that.
They really needed to do. That's the first thing. Second thing, getting a win in impressive fashion by an impressive margin. And, I've been having some discussion about this, and I think we talked about it in the preview, that one feature of this Michigan State team, which don't always, I could even maybe say rarely see, is that I understand the one-loss record doesn't look the way anybody wanted it to or expected it to. And, fundamentally, losing close games against good opponents doesn't feel great. In some ways feels worse.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
But what this team has done, at least to date, is against bad or outmatched opposition, they've pounded them.
Yeah.
Meaning win by 15 plus. Michigan, if you want the answer fundamentally to why Michigan State still ranks so highly in pretty much any of the metric systems you want to look at. Net, KenPom, Torvik, all the major ones. It's that they pound mediocre and bad teams, and if they lose against a good team, they don't get pounded. They play competitively.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that formula, we talked about it a lot last year in regard to Ohio State. Like, how is this team, with the record that they've got, still in pretty decent position in terms of the metrics? And that was why.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't get blown out, and they did beat a lot of bad teams by big margins. Now, you can argue, as I did last year in regard to Ohio State, that at least in some of the systems, that's, in my mind, a bit of a flaw.
Yeah, right.
I'll take it for Michigan State this year, but it is, I think, an indication that those things aren't perfect yet, and they need to be, that element needs to be looked at, because what it tells you in some instances, definitely in Michigan State's case, I think, if you want to extrapolate to what it actually means to the real world, is, as they said on the broadcast, Michigan State's ceiling, you can see how high it is.
Yeah.
And you can understand when you see these games, and in turn, when you see them right there with other good opponents, you can see why they were regarded the way they were in the preseason, and you can also see what the potential still is of this team. So in that respect, it makes some sense, because it is, I think, accurately, those rankings are accurately reflecting what this team is. It doesn't necessarily help you in determining wins and losses, because so many games, especially, again, against good opponents, are decided on a very fine line. And, you know, we saw the Illinois game. That game was winnable for Michigan State, absolutely. But for a variety of reasons, some within their control, some outside of it, they didn't make the plays, the 2 or 3 plays they needed to make to get it done. And, you know, it's frustrating, but I think it should also lead Michigan State fans to realize that, you know, talk about, look, if this team, you know, I think it's a when, not if, but when they're in the NCAA tournament, regardless of where they're going to be seated or what the record is going to look like in comparison to who their opponents might be, they're going to have a shot. They're going to have a shot to make a serious run. I still believe that. And saying that about a 10-7 team might strike people as strange, and I get it. But truthfully, I think you see it. You should be seeing some of it with your eyes, but if you don't trust your eyes, you should see it in how Michigan State is regarded in the analytics world, because it is telling you something about the quality of their team. It doesn't tell you, are they going to start closing out these close games against good opponents on a regular basis? It doesn't answer that question. But it does tell you that, no, your eyes aren't deceiving you. This is a team with a great deal of potential.
Let me just add just briefly, I think, we look at the tournament and everyone gets all worried about seeding. And yeah, it's great to have a number 1 seed for sure. I mean, because I feel like the number 1 seed, Purdue aside, it buys you a free game in the NCAA tournament. But after that, you've got, but after that, it really doesn't, it helps, I guess you play 8, 9 or so, but really you're still playing 5 tough games. So it doesn't really matter that much, right? It still comes down to matchups and who you kind of play, how you're playing and who you're playing and how they're hot they are. And so you can get got by just kind of anywhere in that seeding outside of a 16 seed usually. Obviously there have been 2 instances, but that's really all that matters. Even a 2 seed, as we've seen, it doesn't mean that much.
Yep, absolutely. And look, I would also say this, and I think we touched on this last year, and the results bore it out. For a variety of reasons, but I think more than anything, it is the effect of the portal. And in turn in combination with that NIL, but essentially the portal. The difference in quality and potential between seed lines has never been lower in my life.
I think you're right.
Last year bore it out. I mean, what do we have? We didn't have a single one seed in the tournament. I don't even remember who the highest seed was. Maybe it was Connecticut.
I think
or
it was.
San Diego
They were
State.
Yeah,
like
I think
a
it was
4.
UConn. Yeah,
4 or something. Yeah, and that's just the reality of it. And by the way, if you're paying attention to how the regular season this year is unfolding, you're seeing
it's a lot the same.
plenty that suggests we're likely to have another go around like that. And I think for the foreseeable future, unless and until something changes that brings back roster continuity, and by the way, I do think that's entirely possible. It's going to take some fundamental changes, as we've talked about on this podcast before, but I do think that is possible. I might even say likely, because I just don't think the powers that be like this.
Yeah, it's not sustainable.
From a product standpoint, their own coaches are, I'm sure, screaming about it. But for the time being, while we've got this, I think getting hung up on, God, if we could be a 4 as opposed to a 7, isn't that big a deal? And I even, and the people say, oh, you just don't want to be, in a situation where you're playing a 1 seed early. I look at the teams that are supposed to be 1 seeds right now. None of them look to me like a juggernaut. None of them. Let's put it this way. If you told me Michigan State were playing any of those teams tomorrow on a neutral floor, I certainly would not think, MSU's a decided favorite or even a favorite at all. But would I look at any of them and say, boy, I think I said this the other day, we need to play our A game and they need to be at a C+. Not a chance in hell. There just isn't that much difference. And the biggest thing is going to be, where are you when the tournament starts?
Right. Mm-hmm.
Where's your team mentally? Are you in a rhythm? Are you playing well? And can you get on a heater for 3 weeks?
Yep.
And that really is the truth. So concerns people have about that for Michigan State, I think are they're not nothing, but they're not a whole lot either. The one thing you would say is Michigan State this year did have an opportunity to perhaps, and I can't remember off the top of my head if it's the first weekend or if it's the regional finals. But Detroit is hosting.
It's the first weekend, I think. Yeah, right.
Okay. So that would be unlikely at this stage that MSU would be placed there. As of now, they certainly haven't earned that. That might change, before it's all said and done. But if Michigan State closes the regular season strongly and goes on a run in the Big Ten tournament, would that be a total shocker? No, we've seen stranger things happen. But for now, that would be the one thing. But even that, I mean, we saw Michigan State playing a second-round game against Syracuse in 2018. What happened? That's not a guarantee either. So I just, it's less, these things are less and less of a concern. And I think the further we go into this era, and I think that the bottom line for me is a pretty simple one, which is good in a way. Is MSU playing good basketball?
Yep.
That's really all I want to know. Are they in the tournament, and are they playing good basketball? After that, the rest of this stuff is minutia at this point. Once upon a time, it wasn't. There were legitimate reasons to really want a high seed. Those are fewer now. That's just how I look at it.
Yeah, I think you're right. So let's get back to the game then, talk about that. I guess notables, Malik Hall led with scoring for Michigan State, 15 points, 6 rebounds. He was 6 of 9 from the field, 1 for 1 for 3, 2 for 4 from the line, which isn't very good. But 2 assists, no turnovers, a steal. I mean, he played really well. He's had 2 good games in a row now. Just after that dud and the egg he laid down in Northwestern. So he seems, as consistently good as he's seen this season, except, again, just that little lapse.
If you want to take a broad view, that's 4 out of the last 5 that he's been really good.
Yeah.
And then 1 where he absolutely fell off the face of the earth. But I'll take 4 out of 5. Here's another thing about Malik. Look out. But after today, he's up to 29% from 3.
Almost
he's
there.
Knocking on the door. I am at this point, I am going to be surprised if he does not end the season at least in the low 30s. Maybe even mid 30s, because as we've talked about, his volume is low enough that a couple of hot games.
Yeah.
Well, look at today. He gets 1 shot. He bumps up by 2.1%.
Yeah. It's a weird looking shot, though. But
shot.
it goes.
It is. No question. And it's strange because it's unlike he ever shot it in the past. It's unlike he shoots any other shot, even from the free throw line or a 12-foot mid-range jumper. I can't explain it. I'm not going to worry about it at this stage. It is what it is.
Yep.
And as long as they are going in with more frequency, and they are, that's a good thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think overall, let's look overall at the way he played. That was a really good effort from Malik Hall. That is exactly the way I want to see him playing, because he was really aggressive and looking to get in the post. And look, at this point, I think you can say fairly, when he's got that mentality, he's a legitimately good low post scoring option. I'm not going to say he's Zach Edey, but Malik Hall can get you production there. And the biggest thing to me is simple in regard to that. You want to see him doing what he did for the most part today, which is going straight up or looking to go through people and not fading away. He can hit fadeaway jumpers at times, but it's a negative for him and a negative for MSU. When he plays the way he did today, he is a very productive player.
Yeah, I think teams make a mistake not doubling him, because I think once if you don't do it early, I think he gets comfortable, and then he starts hurting you.
I suspect that we're right on the verge of seeing that change.
Yeah,
it should. You're absolutely right. I would, and I would say the same thing as he gets more reps. They didn't double Jaxson Kohler either.
Right.
And we'll get to him a little more in a minute, but that's another thing that I am going to be surprised if we don't see that change in terms of how opponents are playing MSU. But look, really, really good game from Malik. He deserves to be the first guy talked about, because I think he was their most important player today. And that just needs, I'll state the obvious, that just needs to continue.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, and then, moving on to Tyson Walker, 35 minutes. He played a little bit more, I think, just because Aiken's gotten some foul trouble early on. 4 for 12 from the field, 3 of 7 from 3, real good. 2 of 3 from the line, a couple rebounds, 4 assists, a turnover. Well below a scoring average of 20 points at 13. He definitely had an off day shooting the twos anyway.
Yeah.
But still, defensively very good. I mean, he doesn't let his offense affect his defense much, which is really a positive sign, which you'd expect from him.
It's absolutely, and it's important to note, guys that are having the kind of offensive seasons that Tyson Walker is having, sometimes when they're in a rough spot, it's just not going the way it normally does on a given day. You'll see those players hunt shots and maybe get outside of themselves to try and get themselves going. And that is something that, to his credit, Tyson Walker pretty much never does.
Mm-hmm.
When he takes shots, and I think this was true today, they are within the flow of the offense and they are good shots.
Yeah.
Very rarely. It's hard to think. The closest today was he took one. It was a 3 in the second half at the top of the key.
His air ball.
Yeah, but I understood it.
Mm-hmm.
He didn't realize how close that defender was to him, and it affected the shot. But that's a play that MSU's running where they're looking to do exactly that, get him in rhythm and get him a look. and without a lot of hesitation on it. And he didn't hesitate. He caught the ball, went straight up, and it just was unfortunate. But so again, I don't even classify that as a bad shot. It was more unfortunate than anything else. But he is, fortunately for Michigan State, not a guy who's going to just keep punting until he finds the rhythm again. At least unless you're in a situation where Michigan State, as they have been on some occasions this year, where he's the only thing they've got going.
Yeah, right.
And that was not the case today. So credit to him. But I'm with you. Kind of a little bit of an off day, but still, we're saying an off day is 13 points, 3 for 7 from 3, 4 assists, 1 turnover. Good defense. It's not a bad off day.
Yeah. And Akins also, you could, he ended up fouling out of the game, ended with 4 rebounds, though. He's 3 of 7 from the field, 3 of 6 from 3. 2 turnovers, no assists, 9 points. Not a great game, but again, he defensively, I thought he was really good. And I think that was, again, he's just like Walker, maybe not offensively as his best game, but he's still effective on the other end of the floor.
I thought he had a couple of weird foul calls too.
Well, yeah, I agree.
The one that fouled him out. But yeah, right. Not, all the shots he took were good shots. All the threes at least, and he hit half of them. So he continues finding his way back from that rough start. He's got to be knocking on the door of 40% now on the year, I would think. I haven't looked at updated stats, but he has to be
38.6
today. Okay, so he's right there.
Yeah.
That's what you want. That steady defense and rebounding, and all helpful.
Yeah. And AJ, afterwards, Tom Izzo, at least on the radio show, mentioned that he thought AJ had one of his worst halves in quite a while in the first half.
He did. I agree.
And he had that little stretch. I don't remember if it was in the second half or it was in the first half where you could see just too emotional. He shot a 3 and he kind of had a foul and had a turnover or something. But to his credit, he sort of righted the ship. He has been, at least watching him on the floor, a much better leader than I feel like he's been. He's not complaining about other players' play. It doesn't seem like it to me, and he's definitely lifting him up. And I've been very impressed with him. He's shown a lot more maturity. Only 7 points, but he looked much better, in command of the game.
Yeah, it was not a good game for him overall. I definitely concur with Izzo. I thought the first half he was flat bad. As you said, took some poor shots.
Mm-hmm.
And wasn't really distributing the way you want him to. But to his credit, I think he was steady at least in the second half.
Mm-hmm.
And he was fortunate that he got picked up by, a reserve today at his position who was able to contribute in the ways that AJ wasn't doing as much of. So impressive that happened, and nice to see that AJ recovered and I think played a better game in the second 20, which is what you want to see.
Yeah,
that's what you want to see from a leader. A veteran guy is able to shrug it off and say, all right, I got to be better, and then goes out and does it.
Yeah, and talk about Tre Holloman, 27 minutes, 3 of 6 from the field, all threes, had a rebound and 6 assists, no turnovers, sort of typical line from him, and had a block as well.
Yeah.
He's been, to me, he's been surprising this season. I don't think I expected the shooting. I expected him to be solid defensively. I expect him to be a little better offensively too, but he is, I'm excited to watch him as he continues to progress this season. I'm really impressed with how far he's come. And I know we thought he was going to do more this season, but I think he's certainly exceeded my expectations. I'm not sure about you.
A little bit in terms of, I would not have said wherever he is 45% plus from 3. I wouldn't have been comfortable saying, I expect that. But I did think he was going to be a lot better, and I thought he was going to be more aggressive in looking for a shot, and that he should be. Because even last year, you could see this kid has a good shooter in him.
Yeah.
His release looks good. He was productive in high school. There's no reason to think that he can't be a productive offensive player, but we're seeing it. And I'll tell you where the sign is to me as to where his confidence level has gotten. And he hit one of these. It might have been the last one he hit in the second half.
Yeah, that one in
I
transition.
think it might have been, yes, where he just steps into a transition three. That is a sign, a telltale sign of a guy who firmly believes every shot he puts up is going in. Yep. Whether they do or not is another issue, but his confidence level is there, and for good reason, because the results have been there.
Mm-hmm.
I think today, the other thing that I would note, you saw all the other stuff. He was very good defensively. That block was tremendous. I don't know how obvious that was in Breslin, but that was a recovery play that he made. It was almost a guard doing the kind of thing that Jaren Jackson did a lot of when he was here, where he got beat.
Yeah.
And in Trey's fault, it wasn't that he got beat. It was that he got picked off by a screen.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But that he fought through it, recovered enough to be in position to make that play. There was another instance where he had a defensive rebound where more than most plays, you could see the incredible length he has.
Yeah.
He just went up and his arm just kept extending like Inspector Gadget or Plastic Man? Yeah. And he corralled it, barely, but he had enough wingspan to get it. But I think the thing that we don't always see from him, but I know he has because I saw it from him in high school. He is a very rare kind of point guard, and this is what I mean. Most guys who make highlight reel plays can do that. Obviously, it means they have great vision, great instincts, all of that, and a flair for the dramatic. But they also usually are the kind of guys who take a lot of risks.
Yeah.
And so turnovers are higher. Trey Hollman had some, as much as any plays he's made this year, highlight reel, like no-look passes for buckets, just really high-level, entertaining, big moment kind of stuff. And yet, the turnovers are almost non-existent. That is a very rare line he is walking. And it bodes, we've talked about this here before, but when you think about, and I'm projecting here, I'm doing the thing I usually admonish people for doing,
next
which
year.
is getting ahead of ourselves, right? But when you think about MSU having 2 point guards like Tre Holloman, who's leading the nation, I believe, now in assist turnover ratio, and Jeremy Fears, who was at a 4.3 to 1 before he got hurt, which is crazy good. And you consider that both of those guys are actually dynamic players who penetrate. They look to create shots for teammates. They're not doing Fran McCaffrey's kids and just swinging the ball on the arc and occasionally getting an assist for that. These guys are true playmakers. That sets you up very, very well going forward for the future.
Yeah, then I guess finishing out the starters, Mady Sissoko, 1 for 5 from the field, had a couple points, split some free throws, had 7 rebounds. But, I think defensively was pretty good and able to prevent them from doing much of anything. Cliff Amore he was out of foul trouble a little bit, partly because of Mady, but, I think held his own inside, along with Cooper, too. I mean, they both, that's platooning that position.
Yes. I still think, despite the lack of point production, which is never my metric when it comes to Mady Sissoko anyway, I think Mady had a nice day. I really do. I thought he defended very well. Yeah, Cliff's been struggling. As we talked about on the preview, he hadn't scored the way I think they expected him to, and certainly not the way I expected him to. I thought, because of his pattern through his career, been to get better and better each year, I thought he would probably be at least a 16, 17-point a night guy. Hasn't happened. But Mady and Carson Cooper both, I think, played very well against him defensively. So I was happy with the way Mady played.
Yeah. And I would say though, both Madi and Carson, it's really trouble hanging on to the ball. I mean, a lot of fumbles and Madi,
in the first half, Carson caught one in the second.
Yeah, he finally caught someone in the second half, and some good passes too. That just
Izzo talked about it with Andy Katz going in the locker room. For those who were at the game and didn't see the broadcast, said, "Well, first thing is I gotta find some, or I've got to get my big guys to catch a pass." And they did. Yeah, look, but you know what? Here's the thing, and I'm not saying that's great. I'm not saying it's ideal, but this is a known factor, right? It's a known thing. So I understand that you can't tell your point guards or expect your point guards, hey, don't look to make a play. Of course not. But I do think there's some Judd KYP, know your personnel in there.
Yeah, right. Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
That's what I think. And so I understand you got to play the game the way it unfolds, and you can't ask your guards not to look to make plays. But this is a factor. So I think they also need to keep that in mind too, and try to balance that. Yeah,
you just have to be smart. You're sending it down to the post with either Madi or Cooper. They got to be pretty deep before you're giving them, feeding the ball. If they're out, 10, 12 feet, there's just no point to it unless you're resetting the offense.
And the reality is that if you're gonna throw a hard pass at them, you're taking a chance.
Right. Yeah, right.
That's reality. I wish it wasn't the case, but it is.
Yeah.
And that's not trying to excuse those guys,
Yeah.
But hands, I'm a little more surprised with Carson because I honestly didn't see that as a major problem when he got opportunities last year.
Yeah, I agree.
I think it's been more prevalent this year, and I want to believe there's still an opportunity for that to get better for him at least a bit as time goes on. With Madi, hey man, we're 4 years in. You know the deal. So anyway.
Yeah. Xavier Booker played 7 minutes. He had 2 turns, both in the first and second half. He's 1 for 2 from 3. Had a pair of rebounds, 1 offensive, finished with 3 points. I thought he did pretty well out there. I still think he looks, and I'm not sure if it's partly because sometimes he's playing the 4 and sometimes he's playing the 5. He just looks a little unsure what he's supposed to do offensively, like how he's supposed to be out there, setting screens, or if he's, supposed to be somewhere else. And so that, I feel like that's caused a little bit of confusion for him.
Yeah, at times. I'm actually more concerned with confusion on the defensive end, and I was
sure
he didn't look confused to me today.
I agree.
Part of it is that there's some guys who just have kind of a laconic nature about them, and even if they are playing with focus and playing quote unquote hard, it doesn't look like it. And I think that might be Xavier Booker. It also happens when the same player doesn't tend to show a lot of emotion, and Book doesn't play with a lot of emotion. That's something I know they've been working with him to get him to do, because the feeling is when you play with emotion, that in turn has an effect of helping you to find additional reservoirs of energy and to play harder. Good to see him hit a shot. It looks smooth. We all know he can hit a 3. No surprise. Glad to see him get the 2 rebounds. The offensive one kind of just fell to him, so that wasn't much. But he had a defensive rebound late in the game that I thought was actually pretty good.
Yeah.
So, positive step. Glad to see him. I'm sure he wasn't happy about not playing at Illinois, so it's good to see him get an opportunity and do a little something with it. And we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, I'm expect we'll see him a couple turns against Minnesota as well. I think
Well, for now, yeah, you would, especially because Minnesota can at times go with big lineups. They have that capability and they do it some. So there should be an opportunity for matchups that won't leave him more exposed than some others would. Like Illinois, for example, that just was not a game where you were going to feel comfortable playing book. You just weren't.
Yeah.
So Minnesota could be different.
Well, and finally, I guess to talk about Jaxson Kohler, he came. This is the first time he had some real minutes. He had played 8 minutes, had 2 turns, and missed his first field goal. And the second time, he had a nice little post move and got in there. And you saw kind of those. It was a real quick move where he kind of came around the right and laid off the boards. Had a rebound as well. But I think for me, the biggest thing is that he looked physically like he was okay, like he was running fast, he was moving well, and there were. He didn't look like he was limited in any way.
There was that play that Izzo loved where Tyson
His Superman slide
knocked the ball loose and it just kept going, straddling the sideline but not going out of bounds. And Jaxson laid out to try to. And I actually, initially, I'm still not 100% convinced.
Oh, yeah, he almost knocked it off his foot. Yeah.
It looked to me live. I thought he did. And then you saw the replay. It was tough to tell. I don't have a major problem with the call going the way it did, but it was a hell of an effort.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing that you see from a guy who's not afraid.
Mm-hmm.
So that's a great sign. Loved the bucket. First of all, just get him, third game. Nice to get him a bucket. Finally, he doesn't have to worry about that anymore. What I really liked about it was that play, though, and I believe it was Trey Hollman who was in that 2-man game with him. So Trey went in the post to Jaxson. He didn't like what he had. Kicked it back out to Trey, and then Trey didn't even hesitate. You mentioned Jaxson making a quick move, which he did, but the re-entry was quick as well. There was no hesitation, which sometimes, you see guys, it just take too long to make decisions. Or the entry pass. There was one that really frustrated me. I don't know whether it was AJ, it might have been Tyson, on an entry to Malik Hall on a possession that ended up with a missed shot. The thing that really irritated me about it is Malik was on his spot, and the entry pass was completed, but it took him way off his spot.
Mm-hmm.
You have to actually, it's post entry is a lost art because there's relatively less post play, period, fewer opportunities. But when you do it, you gotta, when a guy's got position established, get it to him in the right place at the right time. And that play with Jaxson, both of those things happened. So that was really, really important to give him a chance to then go into that move and convert. But good stuff. Nice to see him get a play. I agree with you. He's moving well. I didn't see any obvious defensive breakdowns.
No.
I will say this. For those who are clamoring for him to be involved at the 4, thus far, I'm not seeing it. They're using him at the 5.
Yeah, I think so. We will see that.
And I'm happy to see that, at least for now.
Yeah.
Because I think that's an easier transition for him defensively.
Yeah, and I think, you're looking at Mahdi and Carson. I mean, if they have one less turn, it's not that big a deal. Bring some minutes. It's not like you have one of them so dominant and so where you're like, well, I can't take him out of the game. They're sort of, in many ways interchangeable. So it's impressive seeing them. So,
and look, if Jaxson can do, we talked about Malik, I think is really become not a dominant post player, but he's giving this team a legitimate option. And if Jaxson can add to that, well, that's going to make the offense at least a little more diverse, which nobody's going to argue with.
Yeah. And I guess we didn't even talk about Cone Carr. 10 minutes, 2 for 4 from the field. Continues to have his nation-leading freshman field goal percentage, I think. 4 rebounds, 2 of them offensive. 1 off his really bad shot, and then he followed it up. He had a block. And it ended up resulting in a turnover, 10-second violation. But I still am hard time believing how high he jumped to get that one errant pass. I mean, it was insane how high he went up. I feel like he's like eye level with me, and I'm in the second level. They've been at Breslin.
You're not wrong to call attention to that. On the broadcast, they talked about that for a good 15, 20 seconds after it happened. And then Dave Rebson, who was doing play-by-play, said, we're still talking about how high Cone Carr jumped and haven't mentioned that there was a 10-second violation on that play. It was it's look, we all know he is an incredible athlete. I liked the way he played. You know, there was one segment. You know, the only guy who really had it going for them offensively from deep.
Yeah,
was Hyatt.
Yeah.
And there was one segment where Cohen was at the 4, Malik was on the bench, and it was the only time I thought Hyatt had a good look, and it was because Cohen just didn't extend out quickly enough. He wasn't with him.
Mm-hmm.
And so the recovery was just too late. Hyatt hit some on Malik too, but those were actually pretty decently contested shots, I thought, that the kid just hit. You tip your hat on those.
Right.
Cohen's, there was a little bit of a breakdown. I'm like, well, that's it. He's rear end meat pine, and that's exactly what happened. Malik went to the scorer's table. So it was illustrative of the fact that, look, I love Cohen's energy. I love the way he goes at it. I think the future is incredibly bright for him, but he's not a finished product defensively. At times, he's been good.
Yeah.
But sometimes recognition type stuff, which again, not unusual for a freshman. So I'm not really coming at him about that, just noting that there are strides that continue to need to be made. But you look at the other end of things and you see the kind of loud plays he can make that nobody else can, not in the same way. And it's a hell of a thing to have on your side.
Yeah, no question his athleticism makes up for a lot of his deficiencies, recognizing things, and he can recover in ways that other players just have no chance recovering. And once he gets the recognition and gets, better feel for where he's supposed to be in positioning with that athleticism and no longer having to recover, boy, watch out. I mean, it would be interesting to see how that turns out. Well, let's move on to our further sponsors of the game. We'll begin with the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids. Remember, you can get 15% off if you mention rebound when you go get your estimate. They can clean residential windows, high rises, commercial. They do it all. They also can power wash your house, and they are even out here in weather like this. I'm sitting out here looking at over a foot of snow outside my house, and they're coming out Tuesday to do the windows, clean the screens, clean the windowsills, and all that sort of thing. So it'll be interesting to see how nice it'll be on the side of my house. So they do a great work, and I'll tell you exactly how they do for my house and what a difference it makes, but I'm looking forward to it. As I look out what is really, truly a winter wonderland, it's unbelievable seeing like basically 8 inches of snow sitting on every limb. It's really beautiful. And if you didn't have to shovel it, it'd be even prettier. But, that's the trade-off with winter. So they sponsor which Michigan State player cleans the glass the best. And you picked Madi Sissoko. I had Malik Hall. Madi finished with 7 and Malik with 6. And Cooper had 5. So you win. So you get your
one
first
on the win column.
You hits 3-1 now. And my wife turns to me, she's like, "Oh, if Malik had just fought Aiken's a little bit harder for that rebound, it'd been a tie." Near the end of the second half. But anyway, so congratulations to you, and Michigan State did, from a rebounding standpoint, out-rebounded Rutgers, which we expected actually, although the 37-30, they really pulled away at the end as far as when Rutgers finally started missing some shots. But a pretty good rebounding performance. And, from a offensive rebounding standpoint, Rutgers was not very good. They were 17%. Michigan State with 27% offensive rebounding. So even Michigan State not great when we thought they might have more chances. But nothing to get too upset about, I think.
They were we'll talk about it more when we get to the keys. I thought they were really good in terms of their offensive rebounding when it was more necessary.
When it mattered, yeah. Right.
In the first half, when they were missing shots. Second half, they shot better. So it was a little, there were fewer opportunities and it was a little less impactful. But I have to look at the numbers. We'll turn back to it when we go to the keys.
So the Brothers of Just You Gutters, also another guys who get up on the ladders this time of year. Even when it's lousy weather, they'll get up there and fix your gutters, repair them, replace them, whatever you need done. They will come out and do it. Even in the snow, they'll be out there. Maybe not a blizzard, but, and if it's snowing lightly, they'll be out there on the ladders, I promise you. So make sure you check out your gutters. If you've got problems, you don't want them to persist. They can cause all kinds of problems, damage to your house and your basement. So you want to keep that water away from your house. And so if you think you might have a trouble, not even your residence, but maybe your your business so they can do commercial as well. They'll come out and do whatever needs to be done, and they'll do it quickly and have great pricing. 10% off if you mention Final Four when you get your estimate from the Brothers That Just Do Gutters. They also have heated gutters since, again, like I said, I'm looking at about a foot of snow sitting on my roof. If you want to not have a big buildup of ice and snow on your gutter, it is a great option for either your business or your home. You can, again, brothersgutters.com. You can find the contact information below to find ways to contact the franchise either in the greater Grand Rapids area or the Metro Detroit area. The Brothers Suggest Your Gutters. And so the player that Michigan State had to keep in the gutter was Andre Hyatt. He averaged, I think it's a little over 12 points a game. He finished with 14. He was 4 for 9 from the field, 3 for 7 from 3 or 4 from the line, a rebound, an assist, no turnovers. He ended up fouling out at the end of the game. He was kind of in and out of the game because of foul trouble. I guess I don't know what you think. I think he just kind of played an average game. He wasn't super impactful. He definitely kept Rutgers in the game by hitting those threes early.
Yes. It's a hard one for me because it's hard to say a guy who scores slightly above his seasonal average that you kept him in the gutter. But I'm with you. I think that he's not just a 3-point shooter. In fact, that's not the majority of what he does. And he only had one basket inside the arc in this game. He only had one rebound. This guy was, if I remember correctly, yeah. So they kept him off the boards. And I also think you look at what Michigan State's power forwards did against him. Malik Hall won that battle.
Yeah.
So we'll call it a draw.
Yeah, I think that's fair. He definitely, and I feel like the threes he hit, they were contested. They were like pretty well defended.
Other than the one he had was wide open against Cohen.
Yeah,
the ones against Malik, I agree with. Those were tough shots that he hit. So hey, okay, tip your hat. Credit to him for hitting them, but those were not great looks.
Yeah, I mean for quite a while that game, I was looking over and Rutgers is shooting 50% from three. I'm like, this is not sustainable, and ultimately it wasn't.
Right.
They ended up missing a bunch later. So let's talk about the keys of the game then, brought to you by Nudge Printing. Nudge Printing is your go-to spot to get Spartan apparel or the collegiate apparel. They've got a massive selection, hoodies, t-shirts, sweatshirts, whatever you need. They've got stuff that's basketball, football, whatever you need as far as Spartan stuff. They also have vintage Spartan logos. So head on over to Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com. You can get anything you want. 20% off if you mention Final Four, or I should say type in Final Four at checkout to get 20% off for listeners of the show. And the first key of the game, which maybe the most obvious, or it was just win. And Michigan State definitely did that. And they won in a fashion that was impressive at the end.
Yeah, you needed a conference win. You needed to keep doing what you've been doing against teams that are a little bit overmatched, and that's beat them impressively. And that's exactly what Michigan State did. It's what the doctor ordered. Now, does it mean that you're home free? Of course not. It's a step in the right direction, and they need to keep putting one foot in front of the other and string this into multiple positive steps. But it's hard to be dissatisfied with this one. In any respect.
It's interesting because I think, in years past, and this goes along to your point you made earlier, very often Michigan State does not cover the spread, when it comes to games. And they certainly didn't cover the spread in the Northwestern game, but I feel like most games they seem to be covering the spread is certainly at home, where they just really just taking care of business pretty easily. And like you said, that is not usually a trend by Michigan State, which is why the analytics sometimes are not kind to them.
One thing that Tom Izzo has actually talked about, and you're seeing them do, is many times in games where they're comfortably up, you would see him go to walk-ons, deep reserves earlier, and he's actually mentioned that he's not doing that to the same extent this year because you pay a price.
Yeah.
In this game, if Rutgers have been able to maybe make it a 14 or a 13-point margin in the end, Michigan State pays a little price analytically, and that does matter, or could matter, when it comes to, again, seating selection, or seating lines, I'm less hung up on. But Selection Sunday, it can matter. And so he's approached it a little differently this year. And today was a prime example. I think in years past, you would have seen Nick Sanders and Steven Izzo come in maybe a minute and a half sooner.
Yeah, I think so.
But they didn't.
That's right. Yeah, it makes it harder for them to, obviously, Steven Izzo trying to get that first bucket, which he ended up getting, but it's been harder for him this season because he's had less time to try and pull that off. Like 2 offensive possessions, maybe 3.
And look, yeah, Big Ten games, as we've said, it's not every Big Ten game that you have an 18-point margin with 3 minutes
unusual
to play. Right. You don't typically. The game is not definitively over usually.
Yeah.
With 3 minutes to play.
Moving on to the second key to the game, perimeter shooting. As we mentioned before, Michigan State was 5 of 11, and then they went 0 for 8 to finish the game in Illinois. And so, would that carry over? Well, Michigan State ended up shooting for the game 48% from 3, which is, pretty good. 40.
Yeah.
And a high volume, 12 of 25 too. Yeah, 12 of 25, 7 of 13 from the second half. I mean, everybody shot the ball well.
And they really spread it around.
Yep.
It was a lot of guys. Tyson, 3 for 7. Jaden, 3 for 6. Trey was 3 for 6. Malik, 1 for 1. AJ, 1 for 3. So it came, Book was 1 for 2.
Mm-hmm.
So it came from a lot of different places. And look, there's just, the bottom line is this is a good shooting team. A good jump shooting team. It is. We've seen enough now.
Yeah.
I think that the start was really unfortunate. And it kind of, as we talked about at the time, you kind of saw it almost spread like a contagion. Where confidence, we're talking about here. But that's long gone. Doesn't mean they're going to shoot 40% plus every time out. But when I'm trying to evaluate in my mind where this team is at and what they are, if you're asking me the question, is this a team that expects to do damage from the perimeter, that can hurt pretty much any opponent from out there, and will get an appropriate amount of its scoring done from there? My answer is yes to all of those.
Yeah.
They've just proven it, and as I've been saying, the last guy who really needs to make strides to get somewhere near the ballpark of where you would have expected him to be as a shooter is Malik Hall, and lo and behold, he's up to 29%.
Yeah.
Everybody else, I think, AJ's kind of right around where he was last year. Tyson's 40%. Trey is way above, and Jaden's getting up close to 40%. If you have 3 guys that are 40% plus shooters at your guard spots, that's a dangerous team, and Michigan State could easily end up there by the time it's all said and done. So It was what we said in the preview was that just look, after that 0 for 8, which was kind of an unpleasant way to finish that game, you just wanted to see them get right back doing what they've been doing for weeks now, and they absolutely did that. And by the way, did it against a very good defensive team. Not a lockdown team against threes as Rutgers, but they're still in the top 100 defensively against threes. And they also do a decent job in limiting the number of attempts you got. Well, Michigan State got 25 up today.
Yeah.
So they didn't really limit those very well either, which is another sign of how well Michigan State played offensively in the second half. Everything, ball movement, man movement, energy, pace, was all massively better in the second half. And so that's how you go from whatever they were, 36% from the floor in the first half to 53% in the second.
Mm-hmm.
It's not an accident.
Yeah, and so then looking at the next key to the game was the transition game. We didn't expect Michigan State to get a lot done, but again, this is a team Rutgers that holds its opponents to really, really slow offense. And anytime you can get in get a shot up earlier, it's going to be to your advantage, especially for Michigan State. They've obviously been much better with that. And so fast break points, 10-6 in Michigan State's favor. There's some secondary things too that Michigan State got into their offense a little bit sooner, which helped. I think Malik had one in particular that I recall where he just got it. I think he had like Simpson on him, and so he got in the post and he got a pretty easy bucket that way. So And that all happened in the second half during that just run where they just blew out 18 or 19 in a row on Rutgers and just to end the game.
Yeah, it was a 19-0 stretch that really won the game. I'm with you. I think that once again, as we often talk about, the fast break points really don't give you a complete picture of the quality of your transition play, and I think that was definitely true today. And also just the pace of play in that second half. Michigan State, I believe, make sure I've got this right. I think they had 31 points at halftime. No, I'm sorry. They only had 28.
It's 28-22 at half.
45 points in the second half, 73 for the game against a Rutgers team that just doesn't give up those kind of numbers very often. So I think that tells you how much better it was in the second half. And I think it made a difference. As we said, every time, every possession you can have that you're not going 5-on-5 in the half court against Rutgers is a good thing. And Michigan State had enough of those, I thought.
Yeah. So then the next one is the second chances. We mentioned that Rutgers not a good offensive rebounding team. They're also a poor defensive rebounding team, so opportunities for Michigan State get extra chances. And like you said, Michigan State had a bunch in the first half. Not a great offensive rebound rate, 27%, but they really did limit Rutgers to only 17% from the offensive end. So definitely a win there for Michigan State and not letting a bad offense team second and third opportunities to score.
Yeah, I think, okay. So we'll view this first, Michigan State's offensive rebounding, since Rutgers is a terrible defensive rebounding team. By the numbers, you would say Michigan State didn't get the job done. But I think, and they only had, off those offensive rebounds, they only had 12 second chance points. But if they didn't all come in the first half, almost all of them did. And that was very, very important for the reason I suggested it might be, which is Rutgers can defend, and if you're going against them regularly in the half court, you might not shoot the way you normally do, and second chances could be critical because it gives you an opportunity to still end up scoring on a possession where you miss a shot, which often happens against them. I thought in the first half when Michigan State was not moving the ball particularly well, they weren't playing with enough pace on the offensive end, and they weren't scoring enough points. The offensive rebounding and second chance scoring was big.
Yeah.
They got at least, I don't know if it was, I'd love to go back and see, at least a couple of their threes, maybe as many as three of them came on second chances.
Yeah, they had a couple of scramble ones for sure.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. And that was great. One thing that you have to say about Michigan State, and I think it was true in the Illinois game, and it was definitely true again today, after the effort against Northwestern where it was just, you didn't feel like they were playing with the kind of toughness, the kind of force that we expect to see. This, again, today was another example, as was the game in Champaign, where I thought Michigan State played Spartan basketball.
Yeah, they played hard. They were getting 50-50 balls. They were all over the floor. Yeah, no, I think so. So the fifth and final key to the game was poise, and so Rutgers definitely has a chance, or they have a tendency to turn people over. And Michigan State, although they had quite a few turnovers in the first half, I think they had like 6 or 7. They ended up with only 9, so they just had 2 more in the second half. They did a much better job holding the ball. Rutgers finished with 10. And I also think with poise, we did not mention this, but I think the fact that Rutgers was shooting really well from 3 in the first half, for Michigan State to hang in there and not kind of let that get them. I mean, Rutgers shot 43%. They ended up with 39% for the game, which is 11 points higher than their season average. So they shot the ball really well for them, and it didn't really affect Michigan State. They hung in there despite being pushed by Rutgers.
Over the course of the game, I would agree it didn't take them out of what they want to do. And that is an important part of poise. You're right. I think there was a segment we talked about with AJ where he got kind of in the midst of some of that, but it didn't last long.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, look, the fact that MSU was able to settle down and only commit 2 turnovers in the second half, that's another big reason why you're looking for reasons why Michigan State scored 45 points in the second half and were so much better. Well, you don't turn it over. That helps. Look, this is, I don't think this is hyperbole. This is the best team Tom Izzo's ever had from that perspective. Valuing the ball, not giving it away, and making sure that the possession is ending with you at least getting a shot up. You know, that is not something that's usually an area of emphasis at Michigan State. It's not something they've ever particularly excelled in. It's overcome by their strengths in other areas. The thing about this team is I don't think that they're doing it because they're reinventing how MSU is playing. You know what I mean?
Right. Yeah, they're not playing. Like, they're not playing Wisconsin basketball. So that, well, they were last year a little bit, but they're intentionally slowing down.
We've talked about how of late they've been much better, and I thought it was true again today, at trying to play fast because that's an advantage for them. So they're still doing that. They've got a collection of players that I think just happen to, for whatever reasons, that they're just not as mistake prone. You know, I talked about Tre Holloman and Jeremy Fears, 2 guys like that. And then you add in Malik Hall is making those kinds of, he's making decisions in a much better way than he ever has in his career. Jaden Aiken's solid. Tyson Walker is very, very good. AJ, who's your leader, is probably the guy who's most prone to playing in a more typical Michigan State fashion.
Yeah.
But it's only one guy. So, yeah, that was really important. You know, we talked about Rutgers isn't a ball hawking team, and they weren't today. But that defense, when they string you out, make you play 30 seconds of offense in order to get a shot up, sometimes that's going to lead to the opponent making more mistakes than they otherwise would. And Michigan State did a great job of avoiding that. They also did a great job of not falling prey to, in general, to what that 30-second thing can do to you. And on the flip side, I think MSU had 3 shot clock violations forced.
They had 2 in the first half. I'm not sure if they had 1 in the second. I don't remember.
Yeah, pretty sure they had 3, and there was a 4th where they were 0.2 seconds away from getting it. Where the ball went out of bounds, and they were correct when the officials looked at it to give them 0.2, but that was basically a 4th. So just outstanding. Look, we know Rutgers is challenged offensively and all the rest, all true, but that doesn't change the fact that Michigan State was really locked in on the defensive end today.
Yeah, I mean, Rutgers is not good, but they still held a team to 50 points, or 55, I guess. It's outstanding, and this is why Michigan State has this is why the metrics like them, because Michigan State, as much as they've lost a bunch of games, but they still are really good defensively, and they showed it again today. And it's going to
absolutely
it'll start showing up in the win-loss column at some point. Well, it's going to start. I think
we're about to see it.
Yeah,
we're about to see it.
Let's hope.
The schedule is such that this is the period, and I say this is the period. It really largely will be true the rest of the way, where you expect Michigan State to really reel off several wins. That doesn't mean they're gonna win them all. And at Wisconsin, at Purdue, I would say maybe after today, it's funny. Maryland is a team who didn't have quite the level of expectation Michigan State did, but they were expected to be a good team, and I picked them, I want to say 5th or 6th in the league, so I thought they'd be good. Yeah. I thought they'd be good, and they've been really bad for much of this year, but they just went into Champaign this afternoon. As we're recording this, I watched the end of it when we started our episode here, and they handled Illinois. And so now you're looking at next weekend, Michigan State goes into College Park. That game maybe looks a little different than it did a week ago. But regardless, yeah, there's some tough games. It's not that they're all going to be cakewalks, but it's why I emphasized near the outset of this episode the importance of Michigan State taking care of business against teams they ought to beat the way that they have.
Yeah.
There's going to be a lot of those games coming up because the Big Ten's got more bad teams than it normally has.
Yeah, absolutely.
If you look at it, Iowa's not any good at all this year for the first time in a while. Minnesota, they've managed to rack up some wins. They're maybe a little more competitive than might have thought. It's not a great team. We've seen Penn State.
Rutgers
we've seen Rutgers.
Bad. Yeah.
Well, they don't go to Rutgers, but yeah. Michigan.
Michigan's terrible.
There's some bad basketball teams in this league. So there are opportunities, I think, for Michigan State to really start ringing up some wins. And by the end of this thing, look, if your expectation, as ours was that Michigan State can win the Big Ten, are you going to be a little bit disappointed vis-a-vis that expectation where this ends up? Yeah, almost certainly, because I don't think they're going to win the Big Ten. But is this thing going to look a lot closer to what that expectation was than it does right now? Yeah, I'd bet the house on that.
Yeah. All right. Well, we'll end it there.
We didn't. No. We did not talk about not much about maybe the most important thing outside of getting the win that happened in this game, and that was Steven Izzo.
That's right. We should talk about Steven Izzo.
His first basket as a Michigan State basketball player. And I just top to bottom how great that was. So we'll start with the play itself. He crossed over the defender. It was a scholarship player. Okay. Then he goes baseline, takes the hit, but gets the shot up, bounces around, hit the rim, 2 or 3 times?
It was like a Hoosiers. It bounced, it was all over. But it looked like it was going in from where we were. It's like, it just kept, please go in. Please go in.
And you could see the reaction from the MSU bench, which confirms what you're saying. That was a little less obvious to see on the broadcast because it was coming from the other side. But it falls, which is great. And then I think this is the other nice little dot on the I, so to speak, is that he steps to the line and drains the free.
Yeah.
Convert the 3-point play. Now, the coolest part to me about the whole thing, and I've rewatched this already a handful of times on the internet, is the reaction of his teammates. They went crazy. Tyson Walker sprinted over to him on the baseline to pick him up, closely followed by the rest of the entire team. I encourage people, take a look at a few replays of this and look at all the different facial expressions. Jaden Akins was the first guy, from what I could see, who had a sense that shot was maybe going to fall, because his reaction on his face was almost immediate. And then, it bounces and he's kind of jumping up and down with it, and it falls and he goes crazy. But just what it says about the culture at Michigan State, the way those guys all feel about each other, that was just tremendous. You couldn't have asked for a better top to what was a pretty solid day anyway.
Yeah,
to see that happen.
And I could say, being in person, the Breslin Center went totally insane. I'm sure you could hear on the broadcast, but it was the loudest it had gotten all day.
As loud as it's been in a while, I would say.
For sure, yeah. Yeah, and so now he ties Nick Sanders for scoring this season, so they both are averaging 0.4. So, there's a little contest now. Those, Nick's got a 3 and Steven's got the
what else
and 1.
You know what else is great about it too? And we don't know how we would assume that there probably aren't going to be like a boatload of opportunities for those guys to get extended minutes.
Yeah.
Maybe a handful, because as we said, there are some bad opponents. So I could see a few more where they're able to get in for a minute and a half, that kind of thing. But the fact that the pressure is now off.
Yes.
For him, for the team. So every other time those guys see the floor, they can just go out and play.
Mm-hmm.
They don't have to have that on there because that's, it's all cute and all people chanting your name. And that's, that's great. I'm not blaming the fans for doing that at all, but it had to feel like a huge weight on his shoulders. It had to, because he wants to do it for himself. He wants to do it for his dad, his teammates, and of course the crowd. And I would expect he wouldn't be human if it wasn't weighing on him every time he took the floor. And now that's over.
Yeah.
Now he could just go out there and play freely and not sweat it, which is great for him.
That's why I was so happy when that fell through, because I'm like, oh, now he's just going to be in pressure-free free throw versus the previous times of line. He's got to be thinking about it, and et cetera, et cetera.
And of course he drained it. It looked smooth, and because the pressure's gone. So that was a great way to end this thing, and hopefully all of it today, the way MSU played, that moment, all those things will act as a springboard to help them carry even more momentum into the second half.
Yeah, absolutely.
Into the remainder of this first half and then the second half of Big Ten.
Start a nice winning streak here.
Yep.
So again, visit our sponsors, Nudge Printing at nudgeprinting.com, the Brothers Just Do Gutters at brothersgutters.com, and the Squeegee Squad of Grand Rapids at squeegeesquad.com. Also, as an added little teaser here, we will be coming up pretty soon with the Minnesota preview when Minnesota comes into the Breslin Center on Thursday. But we will be having a returning guest, retired assistant coach Mike Garland, who will be coming and helping break down the Minnesota Golden Gophers. So make sure you don't miss that show. Again, if you've not yet had an opportunity, please subscribe to the show. If you're a normal Spotify person, again, make sure you get those ratings in so we can get the people to realize where it is as it has moved on Spotify. So until next time, the Final Four is on the schedule. Go Green.